Glad to have you all here today in our the fifth of the series, Beyond Belief. Now, I'm Madhujit, and I'm the founder of Ananya Women at Work, a diversity and inclusion consulting organization. Beyond Belief, to give you a background about our series of Beyond Belief, now during our growing up years for each one of us, we, at every stage in our life, we acquire certain beliefs and which become part of our identity. Now, different stages of our life, different instances in our life, and the journey itself help us discover this belief. And the growing up is about busting these beliefs, and these beliefs could be our own or are somebody else's. So today, as a guest, we have Pujita Krishna. Thank you, Pujita, for being with us. Pujita talks about her beliefs, about her growing up, and how she talks about how she has been trapezing the non-linear in a very linear life. Okay, thank you, Pujita, for being here. Now, before I introduce Pujita, let me introduce my co-host today, Kirtika Rajaram. Kirtika would be taking all your questions. And Kirtika, would you like to say hello to everyone?
Yeah, hi everybody. Today's session has been waiting for a long time to have it with Pujita, and I'm very thankful for Pujita for joining us today. And if any questions you guys come up with, you can type your question and I will be more than glad to read it out for you all, or you yourself can unmute and speak in between. So I'm very excited, looking forward.
Thank you, Kirtika. And about Pujita, Pujita is the founder and artistic director of Feet on Earth. Pujita Krishna has an eclectic academic and professional background, a dancer and writer primarily. She has had a diverse career spanning several areas such as media, films, journalism, community work, teaching, and training. This wide-ranging experience has cumulatively lent itself to shaping her artistic personality and perception. With master's degree in fine arts specializing in dance from University of California, Pujita has a multidisciplinary background in dance. She's primarily an Indian classical performer with expertise in Vilasini Natyam and Kuchipudi. She's also trained in many Western forms such as modern, jazz, and flamenco. And Pujita, this is the first time I'm hearing flamenco. I heard it the first time from you, rather, I should say.
I'm glad. Yeah.
Pujita also has an MA in English Literature and a PG Diploma in Environmental Education and Management. She is a Doordarshan graded artist for Kuchipudi. Her thesis, Revival of Vilasini Natyam at Ranganath Swami Temple, Hyderabad, has been published by ProQuest, a prestigious academic publisher based in Michigan, USA. She is a recipient of Junior Fellowship under the aegis of Ministry of Culture. As a writer of fiction, several of her stories have been published in different media, including her short story, A Bird in Flight, that has been published in an anthology by Grapevine Publishers, New Delhi. Her novella, Smitten, has been published by BecomeShakespeare.com, a Mumbai-based publishing company. Her articles on dance have been published in peer-reviewed academic journals as well. She currently writes on dance for Hindu as its dance critic as well. She has several performances to her credit, which includes prestigious cultural venues such as Nityanjali Festival at Chidambaram, IIDF Festival at Bhubaneswar and Bangalore, the Gurubayur Temple Festival, Kathak Mahotsav, including international performances such as Picnic at Sydney, Australia, and for the Gandhi Center at The Hague, Netherlands. And Pujita, I think I should stop here because people are waiting to listen to you rather than listen to me about you. There's so much more to tell. So welcome to this show. Welcome to Beyond Belief, Pujita. Thank you for, once again, thank you for accepting our invitation to speak over here. So Pujita, let me ask the first question. You're a dancer and a teacher in English literature. Now, dance and English literature are not complementary professions. Now, how do you manage between the two non-complete professions and doing the best in both? How do you manage that? We'd like to know more about it.
First off, thank you, Madhujit and Kirtika, for having me here on this forum. I am really, really excited to be part of this and, to be able to talk about my journey. So thank you so much. And that was a very, very gracious introduction. Thank you so much, Madhujit. So coming to your question, actually, I'd like to say that the two things that I do are not as disparate as they seem, because there is, for instance, as a dancer, I do have some component of teaching involved. So that I do teach dance. There is communication there. Then as a teacher of English also, I'm teaching. There is communication. So there is communication involved in both these processes. Thankfully, I'm not teaching a dreary subject like, economics or, well, I mean, chemistry. I teach literature, which is a very, it is so succulent, and there's so much emotion and history and so many things involved in literature. So it kind of makes it that much more, and requires a lot of emotion as well. When you're teaching literature, you need to be emotively engaged as well, which is also something that you need to do in dance. So I kind of feel that, one complements the other. It's not really as different as they seem. And I think that my training as a dancer really helps me in the classroom situation. And my training as a teacher of literature helps me. The other thing is, dance has a lot of literature because it's such an integrated form. It's a performing art that encompasses pretty much everything. And there's a lot of literature in dance. So I kind of feel that, I don't feel like the one is different from the other. But when you talk about conflicts, I have to say that, of course, when you are working full time, then there is because I was such a free bird with, of course, short stints of time in different organizations, but more or less have kind of dictated my own terms in terms of how I want to live my life, and my life and the day, for instance, that it becomes very difficult for one to kind of fit oneself into a full-time role. So that is where the conflicts really start, because then it is a question about how do you allocate time for dance and the creative pursuits. So like you said, how do I manage? It is difficult. It is challenging, because I come back home in the evening, and then, one is so drained after a full days of teaching, but then, you keep pushing yourself. And I try to find time, especially over the weekends and things like that. So, I do that, but so that's where the conflict really comes from, is, managing the time.
You actually answered my next question too. It was about what are the synergies. So you've talked about the synergies before you've talked about the conflict. So thank you so much for that. And, I would like to ask you, it's something that you're teaching senior students, and do they know about your dance profession?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because initially, I used to try to keep both very separate from each other, as in I tried to maintain a Jekyll and a Hyde kind of a duality about it, that my morning role, the day role stays distinct from, who I am once I come back home. But unfortunately, I had not there's something called the internet these days, and it's not possible to stay anonymous, so the kids, I don't know how the word got around, somebody, and this was a social media presence also, right? Because kids, you will be surprised to learn that the first thing that they try to do is they try to find you on Instagram or Facebook or something like that. They try to kind of figure out where, and so then one thing leads to another, and they find out all that they need to know. So unfortunately, they came to know about the fact that I'm a dancer quickly, and they came to know that I've written a book also, and then a couple of them went and actually bought the book. And I have to say, my book was not really meant for under 18 children. It's meant for mature adults. Then I realized, and they themselves told me, ma'am, we are the Game of Thrones generation, ma'am. We know everything. So I said, okay, great. So it's fun. It's a different generation, because I've been teaching over the last nearly 20 years, and I've taught different generations of kids almost, the ones in the last 2 decades almost. And I see that there's such a change with the current generation is so cool with a lot of things, so it's interesting.
And have they ever asked you to dance in the class?
they've not. But a couple of them are very like, they come to me for advice on dance, and they ask me, ma'am, like they'll send me a random video and say, ma'am, what do you think about this video? Like recently a girl, my ex-student, she passed out of 12th last year. So she sent me a video of like a rehashed, somebody doing a fusion of Bharatanatyam and hip hop in some place in Paris. And she said me, ma'am, what do you think? It's going viral, this video. I kind of gave her my 2 cents and I said, I'm sorry, but I'm from a different generation. I can't accept this, So yeah, they do that, but they've never asked me to dance in the class, thankfully.
I'm sure after watching this, they might do that. All right. So you've talked about a very non-linear life. The theme today is trapezing the non-linear. And your growing up years, you were kind of getting up to be a hobby singer, and that's what your mother was preparing you for. And it's only after your graduation that you decided to become a dance. That's quite a late this thing. So what prompted you? What brought you into dancing?
Certain key things happened. Incidents and certain triggers, I would call them. First of all, you brightly mentioned, I was really somebody my mother had pegged as a singer, because she felt that I had a good voice and therefore I could be groomed to be the singer in the family. And my sister, she kind of felt, was more the dancer, because she was always a more gregarious person between the two of us. So that's how it kind of started off. Of course, at every station that we were posted at, my mother would hunt down some officer's wife, usually a Tamilian, who would teach us music or Bharatanatyam. That was the only thing. Kuchipudi was unheard of, at least in those other places, apart from AP. So we did that, and even I used to go, but my sister was more of the dance, like the star dance, and I was more of a shadow. But then things changed when I kind of, in my late teens, around 17, 18, because we used to...
Pujita, I may have to interrupt here.
Yeah.
You said you had to go to different stations. What does that mean? I mean,
my father was in the Air Force. Yeah. So, as a result, we were in fact posted to, again, that is another traipsing the non-linear wala thing, because very few people have, there are people who've been in the forces, but I feel that my case was a little unique, because my dad always got posted to these small, far-flung, towns. We never lived in big stations ever. Like we never got posted to Delhi or, the bigger towns, so cities. Yeah. So I was born in this little thing called this jungle town called Hashimara. Nobody, even today, nobody knows where it is. It's in Jalpaiguri district on the border of Assam and West Bengal. It was literally a jungle in the 70s. 77 was when I was born. So it was like a wild forest. And then from there, we moved to a place called Silchar, which is and actually a small town called Kumbigram. No one knows of Kumbigram or Silchar even today. Another big jungle. This was in Assam. Then we moved to Sulur, which is near Coimbatore in Tamil Nadu. Again, a tiny little place. Nobody knows of it. Then we moved to Jaisalmer. Of course, now people have heard of Jaisalmer because it's become a tourist attraction. But back in the 80s, nobody knew where Jaisalmer was. So, places like that, which were like, very, very tiny stations. I remember when my dad was posted in Silchar, we used to come back from our summer holidays. We used to live in Bashas, those bamboo huts. And elephants would have, wild elephants, rogue elephants would come and destroy the Bashas. So, we were forced to move to the mess and things like that. So it's crazy childhood. And so that's what, so that was very difficult for any of us to continue any kind of training, anything serious under those circumstances. We were lucky that we even got schools to study in, because the kind of places we went to, if you indulge me, I'll give you an example. We used to go to the school that I went to was another Basha, was like a bamboo thing, and they didn't have teachers. See, they couldn't hire teachers. Who would go and teach there? This was back in the 80s. Who would go to such a far-flung school? So they used to locally hire the local whoever was the teacher, the people over there. So pronunciation, like I had a Bengali or an Assamese teacher who would teach me the first words, and she apparently, I would say L for lion and not lion. And lion means something else altogether. So I'd come back home and say L for lion, and my mother would say it's lion, not lion. So like, things like that. Anyway, so I had that kind of a childhood, and then so therefore it was difficult for my mom to find places to send us to. Anyway, so when we moved, then we moved to the south because my father took voluntary retirement, and we moved to Hyderabad, and in my late teen years, and so it was around 17 or 18, but we lived in Sainikpuri, which is kind of like the cantonment side of town, and so we have this defense club where, we would have dance parties every month, every last Saturday of the month, something that all of us kids look forward to, and it was like this, everybody came and, danced, and you danced, on the dance floor. And of course there was a DJ and all that. And this was in the early 90s, it was quite different from the world that we know now. But that was our one thing and over there, I realized that somehow I realized that I don't have two left feet. And then I'm actually not a bad dancer, and I would, take to the floor. I would be the first one to take to the floor and, just take off. And people would come and tell me, over the years, and Madhu, this was not even just then, like 10 years down the line, 10, 12 years, uncles and aunties would randomly see me in Sainikpuri and say, "You're that girl who used to swish her skirts and dance on the dance floor," So people would come and tell me, "We come to watch you dance." That's when I realized that I can. That was one thing. And then I felt that I should transform that into something more permanent and something that is more meaningful, not just dancing on the dance floor. That's all very well, but it has to go somewhere. That was one thing. Second, around the same time, I read this book called Time Pass, which is the autobiography of Pratima Bedi. And she went on to become this amazing Odissi dancer, but not many. I mean, I would recommend it to any art lover and especially dance lovers, because it is such an amazing book about this amazing woman who had a very difficult childhood, and she got married, and she had a very glamorous life as the wife of Kabir Bedi in the 70s, 60s and 70s. And she was a mother of two in her late 20s, maybe 28, 29 already, when she chanced upon Guru Kelucharan Mahapatra's dance, and she decided that she wanted to do Odissi, and she just took off. So reading that book, and she did many things. She set up Nrityagram and all of that. So that was a transformative. I said, this is somebody I, identify with. Because until then, the idea of a classical dancer is, always like a very puritanical, very conservative, sort of, very straight in the narrow type of an image. But here was somebody who came from a completely different world. And in fact, she wasn't even accepted freely in the beginning. Nobody accepted her. And then she had to fight all that, and she kind of established, and she was a beautiful dancer, and imagine the struggle that she would have had to go through. So that was one person the book that completely changed me. And then the third trigger was, if I remember correctly, was attending this concert of this modern choreographer called Paul Taylor. He's from New York, and of course his ensemble was performing here in Hyderabad. I was lucky to get to see them dance, and I remember that I was so enthralled by the whole thing. I had seen live performances, and each time a live performance is kind of, the idea of a dancing body has a certain power to it, which always attracted me. And so this time I went backstage and I kind of talked to them, and I said, look, I want to learn this, how do I do it? And then they said that the lead dancer, he spoke to me very politely, and he was very sweet. And he said that, are you trained? Are you training in something? So I said, well, off and on, I've done some Bharatanatyam, and I kind of, I was very young. I didn't know what to say. So he says, no, you must train in an Indian, whichever, you have a very rich dance tradition in your country, this rich classical dance tradition in your country, you must train in it. So, that should be your focus. And then you can think about doing modern, or where you have to have a basic classical training. So that is, another very strong incident that I remember, which was served as a trigger in my mind So, you know, these are the things that kind of happened at a very, at an age that I was at a very impressionable age, and it had an impact that sort of made things just sort of take off from there.
And during those times, for sure, you know, even today, parents are not so encouraging of art forms, people, the children taking up art form as a profession. I mean, at that time, it was doctors, engineers, or teachers, if I remember correctly. That was the only profession that they could think of. And how did your parents react? How did they really accept the fact that you were wanting to get into an art form?
Again, I mean, I'll have to answer that question with great discreetness and discretion, because I have to say that, you know, let me start by saying that my parents have always supported me in whatever I have chosen to do. That, no doubt, like they have stood by me and have given me all the necessary help and wherewithal required to it. Having said that, yes, I will not lie. Initially, when I decided to take this up, there was resistance, in the sense that they didn't understand what I was, you know, they thought I was talking through my hat, that I really didn't know what I was talking about, that this is just a momentary lapse of reason. She's gone crazy for a little. Because I mean, I had these, because I remember when I was about in my class 12, momentarily I had this phase when I wanted to become a farmer. And I told my parents, I want to become a farmer, I'm going to be a farmer, and I want to study farming. So my sister said, you idiot, you don't have to study farming, anyone can become a farmer. I said, no. And I remember my dad took me to, in Baroda, outside Baroda, you have the Anand, the Amul farms. So they have a college there in agriculture, BSc in agriculture. There's a huge college. It's one of the best for bachelors in agriculture. So they took me there. This was in 95, I think 94, 95. And we drove there, and I saw that, and I saw the whole thing, and that's when the scales fell from my eyes, because I realized I couldn't fit there. You know, I wouldn't fit in there at all. So I had till then had a very glamorous notion of farming, you know, very romantic notion of farming. And when I went there and I saw those dull buildings and, you know, very unglamorous setup, I said, I don't think I want to do this. So my parents kind of thought that, you know, here she goes again. You know, this is some mad, loony idea she's got obsessed with. It's going to go away. But it didn't. So initially there was definitely resistance, because the question was, what are you going to do with this? And like I said, you rightly pointed out, you know, everybody was looking at something that is lucrative. MBA was very popular. I remember most of my friends were, you know, going in for an MBA. Some of them had even started there because the whole, you know, the .com generation, that was a generation of the start of the .coms.
Yeah.
You know, going for these jobs, you know, and all kinds of things. What do you call them? The customer, you know, those people who what do you call them? Those people.
Customer relations kind of thing?
Yeah, something like that. So they, you know, a lot of people had actually. And no, the ones who take the calls and you know, I'm forgetting what you call them. Anyway, so they had already started off like that. A lot of my friends actually started that way. Now they're doing very, very well for themselves. So, but I didn't have that kind of a notion that I want to do this so that I can make this much amount of money. It was never in my head. I always thought, like, I want to do the arts. I want to be in the arts somehow, you know. And I want to be an artist. And so therefore my mother said, ye bhoot pata nahi kab tak chadega, let's see, you know, that was their attitude. And so very reluctantly, but I have to say, they did do whatever they could. So first my mother took me to Nrityagram. She said, okay, let's go to Nrityagram, check that out. If that is you know, if you don't want to stay there, but I'll come with you because I want to see what that place is like. So we went there, and it was beautiful is to say the least. And but Pratima Bedi wasn't there, because that was the time she was in the Himalayas. Tragically, a few months later she passed away in 98. And so we met with her second in command, Lynn Fernandez, and she was very gracious and, you know, very surprised that this young girl just turned up at her door one day and saying, you know, I want to be here. So she said, we don't get too many walk-ins. We'd be happy to have you, except Gaurima is not here right now. But you think about this very carefully, because it's not an easy life. And, you know, the thing was that they had farming there. So the students who were enrolled as, you know, dancers, to be dancers, they had to spend time with the vegetable garden, you know, farm. They had to grow their own. So I was so thrilled, because combining the two things that I had wanted to do. I was like, here you go. I mean, I can farm, I can grow my own vegetables, I can do dancing. This is the life I want to lead, you know.
And it comes in farming now.
Yeah, so my mother wasn't happy because this was a way in the wilderness. And she said, you know, again, she was like, this is what if you have some medical emergency? There's nothing for miles. Where will you go? This, that, and the other. On our way back, she was trying to, you know, brainwash me. This, no, not a good idea. And I said, I am coming no matter what. Gauri Ma comes back, I'm coming back to Nrityagram. They have said that I can come back. I am, you know, they welcome me, so I'm coming back. Unfortunately, in August of the same year, she passed away. We got news that they never found her dead body. Quite a dramatic death as her life was, you know, dramatic in the way she died too. And so she died. And then so naturally there was a period of mourning and complete upheaval at Nrityagram because they didn't expect that. And so they shut down. And now I was left in a lurch because I was like all set to go to Nrityagram, and what was I supposed to do? So suddenly I was like, what do I do now? You know, I felt orphaned almost. I was so happy for 3 months. I was thinking I'm going to go to Nrityagram, farming, dancing, this, that, and the other. And that didn't happen. Then my mother said, one of our very close family friends, uncle was posted in Delhi at the time. And she said, you know what, Sen auntie, I remember, very close friends of ours. So she said, why don't you come to Delhi? If Delhi is the place that you should be, for the arts, it is the place, come. Yeah. And I wanted to learn Kathak. Yeah. So she said, you know, come to Delhi. I said, okay. So my mother, poor thing, she took me to Delhi. And then she enrolled me in the Shri Ram Bharati Kala Kendra is one of the premier institutions for the arts, for dance in the country. And at that time it was even, you know, had very high standards. So I auditioned and they took me in, and my mother put me in a hostel, and she left the second day. And I can't tell you, I was so unhappy because this was such a different thing from Nrityagram. Nrityagram was what I wanted, you know, trees, a farm, you know, like this romantic life, how an artist should be leading. And here I was in the middle of the city, you know, with the concrete jungle and a hostel, like a concrete building, and people I didn't understand. Like, you know, most of the students in Shri Ram Bharati Kala Kendra were from North India, and they spoke a certain type of Hindi, which I didn't. I mean, I speak very good Hindi, but they spoke with a very rustic accent. They didn't understand where I was from. You know, my English was a problem for them. So there was so much like a cultural clash over there, you know, in Shri Ram Bharati Kala Kendra, that I absolutely hated it. And even the teachers didn't really understand me or where I was coming from. You know, I had a very romantic view, and they were like, they took it very, you know, music, dance was like, you know, that, like all in a day's work for them. Yeah. So Madhujit, what happened was I was completely unhappy. And therefore, I decided to come back. Anyway, to cut a long story short, my parents did support me as much as they could through all the things that I did, but they didn't understand it for a very long time. And I think only in the last, I think around 10 years or so, a decade or so or more, they kind of have gotten used to it and they accept it now. But yes, it was a while. It took a while for them to come to that part.
All right. So, do you have anything to say to the parents whose children are going to get into the art now? Single statement for children whose children choose into art, whereas they would prefer the children to go into some academic lines.
No, I would say that let your children do whatever they want to do. Firstly, that is important. Like my parents didn't stop me. Then at no point did they say that, no way, you know, this is not allowed to you, or, you know, we'll lock you up and ground you if you decide. They never did that with any of my choices, whether personal or professional. They would tell me that, look, these are the dangers. And you know what, Madhujit ji, they were right about a lot of things. And I realized that too as I went down the road, when they said that, where will you get your money from? Or main concern is with, you know, obviously your finances. And so, you know, that's why my mother kind of ensured that I did my master's in English literature, which of course I wanted to do anyway. But she said, get all the degrees that you can on the side, you know, get it, because you never know tomorrow what will come handy. And she was so right, because both of them were so right, because today I teach English. I mean, today I wouldn't be hired in one of the best schools in the country or the city if I wasn't, you know, an MA in English literature. So, I mean, I may have written a book, but if I don't have the degree, they're not going to hire me. So, so that's what I think. Parents should definitely let their children go down the path that they choose for themselves. But they should definitely, you know, tell them that these are the hazards, that these are the obstacles that will come your way. You should prepare, and they should help them prepare, you know, for that. And that is one, definitely. I mean, tell your children, let there be no restrictions. Sky is the limit. But let them also know that there is every possibility for failure. Things could go wrong, and if they do go wrong, then you should take it the weight. I mean, I tell my kids in school too, you know, I tell them, look, you are at the threshold of life. You're 17, 16, 17, and I'm sure you have dreams. You know, some of you may want to become there's some cricketing, you know, budding cricketing stars in our school, and I tell them that you may be the next Dhoni, or you may not.
Yes.
Be prepared.
Yes.
You know, you be prepared to not be Dhoni also. Don't, you know, if that dream doesn't work out, you shouldn't come crashing down. That shouldn't happen. So start out hoping that you will be Dhoni or better than Dhoni. And if it doesn't happen, be okay with that too. You know, just enjoy the journey is what I tell them.
That's so beautiful. Thank you for that. That's really, really beautiful. All the parents were sitting out there. I'm sure they have so much to hear. So you just talked about in your growing up years, your parents were not encouraging, and probably after, you know, after taking up dancing and after they kind of accepted, okay, you're going to be into the Indian dance form, you suddenly give a bombshell to all of people around. You're doing well in your profession. You were doing shows.
Yes. Yeah. With, by the way, I'm happy. My guru is here, Dr. Anupama Kailash. She's here, so she's my guru. I've been with her for the last, good God, close to two decades now, about 17 or 18 years. So I'm happy to have her. She's here. And also the principal of our school, HPS, Dr. Skan Bali is here. So I'm very happy to have these prestigious guests in our midst.
Thank you for being there, and really appreciate you joining us. So I was going to ask you a question that you've talked about, like your parents kind of accepted that you're going to be there, and you were doing your shows, and you were developing, I mean, you were doing with your gurus, and you were kind of developing your career there, and suddenly you decide that you're going to do MFA, and with everything which is going right over here, you leave everything and go as a student life. And in those days, student life was not easy. No internet, nothing at all.
I mean, no, 2008, there was internet, but no WhatsApp.
Our phones were limited, phones were expensive. So what happened? I mean, how did you decide, and what was the experience like to go back as a student, and that too in a foreign land, a foreign culture, a foreign dance form, and you kind of tuned your body to a certain dance form, and then yes, you go to another dance form, and studying there. So what was the experience like?
I have to say that that was another very, I mean, every so often I have to say I've had in my life these definitive sort of experiences, you know, every I'd like to say a decade, but whatever. I mean, every so often I've had these very, very transformative and definitive experiences, which I would term as milestones. So in my case, I think going to the US to do my MFA was another such milestone, because it really did, change my perspective more than anything else to a lot of things. Just the way I used to deal with things, and how I, began to deal with them once I came back. Just 2 years, but it really, really mattered. So why I decided to do was, again, like I said, I've never been a linear person. I've never been a person who is happy with the straight and the narrow. I get bored. Although I'm not a person who loses interest easily. It's just that I have to find something challenging to do, which is why even at any given point of time, I'm never doing one thing. I'm doing 4 or 5 things. Even when I'm reading like 3 or 4 books at the same time, because it's just doing one thing at a time. Maybe it's not a good thing, I don't know, but that's not who I am. I like to do multiple things because they keep me engaged, or I feel that one thing kind of complements the other. Mm-hmm. So every so often, so when I reached a point in my life where I felt like, something is missing. I need to do something that would challenge me a little bit more. And and I don't know, the idea just came to me one day. I think I was having a conversation with a friend who was living abroad, and we were talking about something. She says, you know what, you are the type of person who should be studying the arts, you know, in the Western academic system, because that would fit you so well, because, you know, that's the kind of mindset you have, you know, because everything over there is no holds barred. Nothing is, you know, above question. That is one good thing about the Western system. So she says, you should definitely do it. And I thought, well, you know what? I mean, I said, really, you know, I kind of brushed her off then. But then when something went off in my head, and I said, let me give it a try. And I started applying. And, you know, when something has to go wrong, like somebody said, Murphy's Law, it'll go wrong. But when something has to go right, all the stars, every power in the universe will somehow align itself in a way that will make it work for you. Mm-hmm. And I have to say that that's what happened when I went to University of California. It just everything. And it was at a time where, you know, the recession was going on. In fact, America was going through a very, very bad recession. And people were shocked that science students didn't get fellowships and I got a fellowship, you know. So I considered myself very fortunate. I guess somebody up there likes me. And then I went there, and I think it just worked for me right from the start. It was difficult in terms of just managing the life, because I lived, I mean, I have to say I was under below poverty line for a while there, because I was paid a small stipend as a teaching assistant in the university, and I used to teach. I had my own courses teaching. You're basically, as a grad student, you are nothing. You are like a lecturer. You're considered a lecturer, but it's just that you are also enrolled for your studies. So I used to teach dance there. At the same time, you know, I was a student, and for which I was paid a very small stipend, which was just enough for me to pay my rent and all my expenses. So literally at the end of the day, I would count the money I had left, you know. So that was one beautiful, I mean, I think I enjoyed poverty. I really did enjoy it, because it gave me a lot of perspective. It made me a good planner, because I understood the value of the very last dime. And also, I mean, as a dancer, because we artists, we don't make a whole lot of money. So we are anyway, you know, kind of trained in that. So that was one thing. Also, the course was very rigorous, because we worked on a quarter system, and which meant that right from the word go, you're handed out your assignments, you're told what you have to do, and you're on your own. You know, like here in India, you're kind of pretty much held by the hand. You're led by the hand. I think people here are very, you know, students are very mollycoddle, because they're given everything sort of, you know, on a platter. Whereas over there, you're on your own. Even when you're presenting your thesis, I mean, I remember I had a very difficult time, because I said, we're going to give you the space, and you're just going to, you know, you just have to fix it and make sure it works. And so all the, you know, the fittings and all the settings, everything had to be done by me, and I had to arrange for it on my own. And I was in a foreign country, you know, all of that. So it really does keep you on your toes. And the other thing is that in terms of arts itself, I felt it was a very enriching experience, because they don't stop you from anything. That is one thing that I learned from them, which I admire. And I think we could learn from them, is that, you know, nothing is too sacred that you can't try it out once, you know. If it is an idea worth trying out, you should try it out. That's their attitude. And I like that attitude, you know. So it's not like, for example, like in Indian dance, we're told you should never turn your back to the audience. You never, ever turn your back to the audience, you know. But over there, you know, they're not saying anything. If it works, hey, if in that piece you have to stand with the back to the audience, do it. You know, how does it matter? So that, those were the things I enjoyed. I enjoyed that out of the box experience, you know. And in fact, we had a transgender person. University of California is an equal opportunities university. So they have, you know, they make sure, like yours is a diversity and inclusion firm. So it was quite in line with that, because it went out of its way to include people of all races, gender, all genders, you know, not just two, all genders. So it was quite an eye-opening experience that way.
Yeah. So I mean, a lot of things that you're talking about, so many beliefs that you went beyond over there to, you know, that's living in that, you know, after living a luxurious life, because I know armed forces, while they money in hand, but the life is of luxury.
Yes, very true. We were never cash rich, but we always had style and privilege. We had that.
That's not reason, which we civilians don't have.
Yeah. So,
yes, being cash constrained, and then going beyond that, you can manage within this kind of a cash with no support anywhere coming in from. I mean, you don't have.
Just to mention, just an interesting example of how life was, I shifted to two apartments while I was in the US in the grad. I was in the grad housing. I chose not to live outside the campus because I didn't have a car. And in California, if you don't have car, you're pretty much crippled. You have to have, it's not like New York where you have a good public transport system, or even San Francisco. The place I lived in, Orange County, is the richest county in the US. People don't drive anything but a BMW and a Corvette, So I didn't have a car. So I chose to live on campus. And I had nothing. When you move in as a grad student, all they give you, it's just a room. There is nothing. So I had to get a mattress. I had to get a bed sheet. I had to get some sort of seating arrangement. So we used to go at nights to, what are called they're called, I'm forgetting the name, it's been so long, place where a designated area where outgoing students just dump their stuff, they're just stuff to be thrown away. So we would go to these places with a torchlight in the night. I would go and they said, this, I can use this, and then go through all the, the ragged stuff lying around. And I did that. I said, I need a decent bed sheet. I need a decent sofa. I need something, So we used to do that. I mean, I've done that. I've gone with a torchlight into dumping sites looking for stuff that I could use in my room.
So the next question definitely comes now. I'm talking about Pujita, who's graduated and looking for some dance schools, etc. So today, if you were to look back and give some advice to that Pujita, what would you do? What would you give?
To the one who went to UCI, or generally
I would say even earlier than that. Right after graduation, you're kind of looking for dance schools.
Yeah. I think, I can't say that, I don't have any regrets and everything is fabulous, and one would want to say that, but that wouldn't be entirely honest. Of course, everybody has some regrets or the other, but I still have to say, despite everything, I don't think I would want to change what I have lived with anything else, because I think it's just been so variegated and so different in so many different ways that for me, I'd rather have a multicolored quilt than a monochromatic blanket. I like that. I like that I have all these little shades to my life that I think make me who I am. A lot of times people don't comprehend where I come from because they have no idea, even the childhood that I had or the kind of experiences that I've had. So I'm not saying I'm special. I'm just saying that my journey has been a little different. So, so like I told you the other day, I'm a bit of an insider, outsider, insider. I never quite fit in, like a round peg in a square hole or a square peg in a round hole or whatever.
So,
sorry, to coming back to your question, I'm sorry. You said that what advice would I give? I would just say that, one thing would be, I think definitely would be that I wish I had been a little more circumspect in terms of maybe finances, maybe, because living a life looking for, cushions and couches in the dump yard is all very well, but at the end of the day, when you've crossed a certain age, you do want to live comfortable. So I just wish I had been a little more circumspect in that respect when I was younger. That would be the advice that I would give.
All right, good. And any advice to the youngsters who are choosing a career which is not so linear or so so wanted? I mean, of course, parents do encourage children today to take up as a hobby or as a profession, dance form or any art.
Same thing. I would say always have a backup. I would say that you need to have a backup. Either you marry rich, or if you're born rich, great, hey, fabulous. But if you don't, then, or you're not lucky, then, well, maybe marry rich if you're a woman. But if not, let's be serious. If not, then I think definitely you need to have a backup. So you need to have that basic education or some sort of a, like a academic, like I'm glad I have a MA in English literature. Today I can teach, which is something that, that would be required anywhere in any institution. So have something that gives you that kind of, that soft cushion to fall back on. And other than that, I think you need to steel yourself a little bit more. I think in my case, I'm a very sensitive person. I may not look that way, but I am an extremely emotional, probably that is why I'm drawn to the arts. I'm a very sensitive and a very emotional person. I react, easily and all of that, which probably lends itself to the artistic vocation. But you need to steel yourself a little bit. You need to be a little hard-skinned, because it's not an easy journey. If you pick something up, if you're lucky and you make it, great. But if you're going to have that difficulty, not everybody becomes Mallika Sarabhai or whatever, Sonal Mansingh. Not everybody aspire in the dance field, or if it's something else, like say in the films, what is happening today, not everybody gets to be part of the 500 crore club, So you need to be strong. You need to understand that whatever happens in the world happens for a reason, and everybody has their place in the sun. Everybody has a place in the sun. And you have that contribution to make to the world.
That's so profound. Everybody has a place in the sun. So once we do that, we're going to follow our passion and not something like
whatever makes you happy. I think at the end of the day, it's not about, yes, it is about money. I realize that now, but it is definitely, I'm happy driving a car, which is not a fancy, I don't know, it's not a fancy, I'm happy. Even if I have a second-hand car, I'm happy. It gets me from A to B. I'm saying at least have that comfort. So you need to be able to provide for that. I'm not saying that you need to, if you're looking for to make a niche in the arts, then one thing you need to kiss goodbye to, like I said, unless you make it big, is you need to kiss goodbye to a sense of privilege or wanting luxuries. You're not going to be able to afford a massive mansion and things like that, unless, like I said, you marry rich or you're one of those lucky few. But otherwise, yes, you will have to kind of that's the price you have to pay. So, but I'm happy. At the end of the day, I'm happy that I'm dancing. I'm happy that I'm doing the stuff that I, that I'm doing. It that makes me happy. I think that keeps me energized more than anything else.
Thanks so much. But in fact, if I would share with you that even while you say that everybody doesn't make it big, but that's true with any other linear profession as well. Not everybody goes up there. So there are takers for second-hand cars, and they love this.
Absolutely.
There are takers for those single-room houses, and they love their places. So,
it's what you do with that second-hand car. It's what you do with that one-room apartment that matters,
And be happy about it. That's
yeah.
Thank you for that. And Kritika, do we have questions here? I can see some appreciation coming in.
Yeah, ma'am. Actually, I think that we do not have questions, but Mr. Thirumal has said that I appreciate your Poojitha for being so authentic, and I don't think so. There's any questions. So
I think there is one person, Anjanelu. I think he asked a question. I think I saw something pop up just now. Is it in the chat box?
Is it a personal question in your?
No. It's my pleasure, Poojitha. You are, after all, my first student.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That was my guru. Yeah, I think that was not a question. No, but I think Anjanelu asked a question. He's he's from my school, like way back in 9th and 10th. So I think he's asked a question. Do we see it?
Anjanelu, in case if you have typed any question, can you unmute yourself and ask the question?
Poojitha, my question is, hi Poojitha. The thing is your passion for dance is from school, or after graduation itself you wanted, your passion was for dance?
Yeah, I think you would remember because before my this is after, I think I mentioned that in the initial stages of our talk, that earlier on, like way back in when I was, until my 10th, I don't think there was any inclination or even a hint that I would want to take up dance seriously, because I was, as I was telling Madhuji, that initially my mother kind of wanted my sister to be the dancer in the family, and she thought would go on to becoming the singer. So there was never any sort of inclination until I think my 16, 17, 18, and I think I told you what sort of drove me towards it. And so till my 10th, till I was about 15, I think, or 15 or 16, I don't think I ever entertained any notions of being a dancer. It was only after, it suddenly came to me, like wisdom came to the Lord Buddha.
Yeah. Anybody else? Anybody wants to say something here?
So much that nobody has any any questions. I seem to have addressed.
Madhujit, can I?
Hi, Thirumal. Yes.
Hi. Wonderful, Pujita. In fact, what I'm really amazed is the kind of vagabond approach you have to the life, the vagabond approach.
Yeah.
And you kept the pace with the flow of the life. That's really amazing. And the kind of courage you had, to take that kind of a roller coaster in life and then deal with that. And I see a lot of similarities, like you said that, we enjoy what we're doing. It's not that, in the process, we'll have to sacrifice some of those things. But nevertheless, I think what matters most is the way we enjoy, what we are doing. That actually gives a lot of inner satisfaction. I really appreciate a lot of learnings, a lot of ideas.
Thank you so
Wonderful.
much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
So now, since nobody's asking, I'm taking the opportunity to ask.
Please.
One question.
Sorry?
Okay, so do your current students, you teach 11th and 12th grade, and do your current students know about your dance profession?
Yeah, I think there's one student here, Bhuvan. He's here. Yeah, he's in 11th now, but I taught him in 9th and 10th. So here's the thing, today this is an interesting story, because I didn't want to tell them that initially, when I thought I'll keep my kind of like play like a Jekyll and Hyde, this is my day job, and or whatever work sphere, and what I do beyond school hours, that's a totally different personality. I thought I'll keep it separate. But the interesting thing today is I didn't factor in for this thing called the internet, So kids find out so quickly, and they found out that I had written a book, and they found out about the book, and then in the book there was some information about me, the author. So they quickly, and how the internet world is. So before I knew it, everybody in the school, most of the ones, at least the ones I taught, knew that I was also a dancer. So there were these questions about, ma'am, this book, and so my book Smitten is really not, I mean, it's a book for mature adults. It is for 18 and above. It's not something that I would, but then that's what I was thinking in my head, but I realized this is a generation that watches Game of Thrones, by the time they're 13 or 14. It's no longer our world when, we would read, people would read Mills and Boons on the sly. These are kids who are watching Game of Thrones. So when I said, no, this book, no, they were like, we're going to buy your book. I said, you're not going to buy my book. So, it was really hilarious. But yeah, they know that I'm a dancer. It's quite nice. Most of them are like, they follow me on Instagram and such. So I'm happy to have their, love and affection.
Interesting. So do they ever put that request? My next question is, do they put the request in class that let's have a dance?
No. By the way, I have to say that my in-class persona is I'm a hard task mistress, in the sense I don't give it. I don't make it easy for them, so they wouldn't dare. But like maybe they will probably like I remember that I think the class 12 that passed out this year, during I think it was teachers was, what day was it? Children's Day. And, you know, they kind of came to me and said, ma'am, we just want to dance, you know, in the room. And maybe I shouldn't say this when Dr. Bali is here, but anyway. So I said, you're not allowed to dance. You know, you can't do this. You're in school. No, ma'am, we just play the music very, very softly. We just want to dance for a little bit. I said, okay. And so we closed the doors, and I allowed them to turn the music on for just a little bit. And then they danced, and, you know, they had some good times. So I do allow that sort of thing. I think it's, we did it when we were young. So I think kids should have that little space to express themselves.
Madness.
You know?
Space for madness.
Yeah, a little space for madness.
We have some questions for you, Pujita, actually.
Yeah.
From Javant, we have a question. What's your goal in dance sphere? And the second question would be, would you like to take the second question, or should I?
First, okay. What is my goal as far as dance is concerned?
Dance sphere, yes.
Okay, it's a very, very challenging question, because at this point, what would be my goal? What do I see? I mean, I don't, I give myself, I give myself, what shall I say, goals which are not, in the sense, they're not targets. You know, I don't say that by such and such time I should have gotten a Sangeet Natak Academy. I don't award, like I won't give myself those kind of goals. But I think for me, the only goal as far as dance is concerned is, I know I still have a long way to go as far as honing my art is concerned. I'm very proud of what I've achieved in these last few years, considering that I joined the game. I got into the game very late in life. So I'm very proud of what I have achieved so far. But I still know that as far as honing of the art, because it's an ocean, especially Indian dance, because it has so much literature, it has so much music, and there are components of which we still are trying to get our head around. So I just want to get better at what I do. I just want to be the best I can be in terms of an artist, performer in dance. That is one. Definitely. And the second thing that I am very, 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 very deeply interested is, I want to do dance-based writing, as in not necessarily, dance criticism, but just stories about performing arts. I want to be able to do that and probably come out with a book that centers around the rich performing arts heritage of this country. I'm deeply passionate about that. It's something that I hope to do someday, hopefully. Yeah.
I'm actually visualizing the coffee table book. So
thank you. From your mouth to God's ears. Yes. That's what I want to do.
Great, Pujita. And we have one more question from Sudarshan. Says, hello, Pujita. What has been your favorite live dance performance so far, which was personally most satisfying?
Which performance I have seen of others, or like he means?
And it's yours. I mean, as far as I could understand, what was
my performance?
Yes, what has been your favorite live dance performance so far, which was personally most satisfying? I'm guessing, Sudarshan, it is of her own, right?
Yes,
yeah.
your
Okay.
own. Yeah.
Okay, Sudarshan. This is very tricky. I don't know, because I have to say that I've never, I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm overly modest, but I have to say I never walk away from a stage feeling I killed it, I nailed it. You know, I have to say I never feel that way. I always feel that I wish I could have done that a little better, or, you know what, I need to work on this. So I always leave with a sense of, not dissatisfaction, but a sense of I could do better. But having said that, yes, I can't say that there haven't been moments. Like I think recently when I think most satisfying was putting up my own production called Swachhanda Valari, which I put up last year in June, which was a complete, my first full-length, work, which I worked on, which was a solo production. And it had a lot of interesting, again, like my life, it had all sorts of interesting influences in it. And I think that left me very satisfied. Also because, I mean, I was happy with despite few things here and there, I was fairly happy with the way my performance went, but also with just the way the whole thing turned out. It was very satisfying. Very rarely does that happen, because usually when you're dancing at, where live performances are concerned, you will always have something, either your costume is not, something has gone wrong with your costume, or your ghungru came off, or your nathni fell off, or, the music wasn't loud enough, or, people were walking up and down. Something or the other will always go awry in a live performance. So it's very difficult to be absolutely okay with anything. But this, my production, since it was my production, I had terrible butterflies in my stomach, because anything could go wrong. And this was in the month of June. Sudarshan, you were there, and we were worried that it would start raining, and this was an open air performance. It was a beautiful setting in Shilparamam, in a place called Shilpasima, and we were kind of dreading that it would rain, but gods were kind, it didn't rain, and there were a lot of good energy from people, and it just went beautifully, seamlessly. So I think that would be my memory of a performance that I was close to being 100% satisfied. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Poojitha. And you have another question. In fact, not a question. Krish Vishwanath says that Poojitha ma'am's dance performance has been beautiful. She has been an inspiration for me. And Krishna asks a question that according to you, you are a better dancer or better writer? You seem to do both equally well.
That's interesting. Yes.
Yeah. So first about what Krish said. Krish is my student also. Krish started learning Kuchipudi. And we often have these chats about, he keeps asking me about Velasti Natyam and Kuchipudi, and he's, quite interested in the art. So yeah, I wanted to say that he's definitely, one of those, kids from the newer generation who take such a keen interest, along with Bhuvan also. He's also here. So, Krish, keep learning dance and keep it up. Krishna, your question. Krishna is my cousin. So that question is it's difficult to answer. What do I like better? It's I don't know. I mean, I can't really say which one. It's difficult. I can't really say one way or the other, but I just think that it is not necessary for me to choose, because as I said at the beginning, the things that I do kind of complement each other. Even writing is in a way complementary to dancing, because again, it is about communication. Even for dance, as much as for writing, you need to have a certain clarity of thought. Unless and until you have clarity of thought, you can't do either. You can't be a dancer, nor can you be a writer. Certainly not a writer. There's no way you can be a lucid writer unless and until there is a certain clarity going on in your head. So I can't say. There are times when I want to dance. There are times when I don't want to dance. I'll say that. I'll go on and say there are times when I don't want to dance, and I just want to read. And there are times when I don't want to write and I just want to watch something on Netflix, There's sometimes I just want to go on a drive, I'm not one of those people who get up in the morning and go, there are people like that, and I admire such people, because they have a very regimental sort of a thing. But my approach is, I like it to come to me organically. And so I feel that there's a space for everything that I do. So I cannot say that I attach myself this to more and this less. I can't say that.
Thank you. So that's again tripsing the non-linear.
Yeah, exactly.
So Thirumal says he has to leave, and thank you very much. It's wonderful to listen to your story with a bit more extension. And can you please share your first 3 performance experiences that would pop up all the time you think about dance? So before I say that, we are at 4:59. So, I mean,
yeah, I'll keep it.
I would request everybody's permission for continuing the conversation, because I think we're having a very... So
what was the question again, Madhuji? What was the question?
It's wonderful to listen to your story with a bit more extension. So I guess Raman Kumari knows you some way, because
Yeah, she's a friend. She's an Odissi dancer herself. Yeah.
A little more extension that I know today. Can you please share your first 3 performance experiences that would pop up all the time when you think about dance? So first 3.
So I've already spoke of my performances, so I think this would be more about the stuff that I've seen, maybe other performances.
Raman Kumari, would you like to speak up?
Raman, do you mean like other performances that I've seen?
Unmute yourself and show your face, and then you can ask.
I think she means other performances. Okay, now this is also interesting because I have to think. Of course, right away, I have to say that it has to be, one of it has to be my guru. Of course, Anupama is here, but our guru, Swapna Sundari Garu, who's our super guru in Vilasdi Natyam, and she is one of the top dancers of India today, and especially in Abhinaya. I think there's no one in this country, and therefore by extension in this world, I can say, who can, really can surpass her where Abhinaya is concerned as an artist. Definitely her performances, definitely the one where we have this festival in the temple called Ranganatha Swami Temple, where we do ritual performances every year, and I remember attending her first my first performance of her in the temple back in 2000. I think it was 2005. I don't recall now. And she does a section at the end. It's a completely improvised section where there's just one line, Pranamata Pashupate Makhila Pate, which is about Lord Shiva. And that line is played over and over and over again by the musicians. And she just takes off. And it's completely impromptu, completely unscripted, completely improvised. Stories from the Shiva Purana just reeling off, through Abhinaya. And she would do it. She did it. I mean, I've seen her many times ever since, but I can never forget that first impact that it had on me. There are many, like I have to say, the one that I saw in, I was in Hague, and we were attending a concert at the, I think it was the national something of Netherlands, and they had invited us to watch a performance at the Hague, and it was spectacular. Just for the stagecraft, I have not seen in my lifetime, and I think at least once in your life you should see how they use the stage. The stage becomes the performance. And the technology is superior. There is nothing. We are nowhere close. We are not even infants. We're not even born yet. When you compare it to the kind of stagecraft that they have, the performance is not just the performers on stage, but it is the entire stage that takes on a character. It's so fluid, and how they do it, the technology is just so superior. So that I will never forget that experience that I had. That was another one such experience. So yeah, I think these are some of, I think really, really something that made you sit up and, take, there have been other performances also, but I think these two would be my top, Akka's performances, and this one performance that I saw at the Hague would be like something that really made my eyes pop out. What inspired you to perform or master Vilasdi Natyam? Yeah, like I said, Praveen, this incident. Of course, I have to thank Anu for introducing me to Vilasdi Natyam, because if it weren't for her, I would never have, would have encountered the form, because back then in the early 2000s it was just this Akka performing, a couple of individuals performing at the temple, and so if only a few people knew about it, and if you knew about it, then you could go and see her dance, and it has a totally different energy, just the dancing as a ritual but not as a performance has a completely different energy. So watching Akka do what she did, like I just explained, was like a completely, like, it just blew me away. And just the form itself, because I had been watching Anu, her Toliviniki, which was her first maiden performance, and the form has a lot of grace to it, and it has a lot of expressiveness to it, which I relate to, because I'm a very I think I'm an expressive person, and I have some background in theater also. So I like something that has you know, expressive quality to it, not overtly dramatic maybe, but you know, it has a certain subtleness to it also. So I think that drew me to Vilasini Natyam, the fact that, and I always have this, you know, I've always been a champion of lost causes. You know, even when I was around the time in 2003, I remember I started learning this ancient martial art called Vajramushti. I don't know how I chance upon these things. It just so happened that, you know, I came to know about this person who was teaching this ancient form, which was an extinct form, and only this person knew it. And it was an art martial form that was performed by Shivaji Maharaj. And there were just 6 of us who were learning that martial art form from him. For different reasons, it stopped. But, you know, so I've always been a champion of lost causes. I always feel that something, if it's rare, if it's different, then it needs to be protected, you know. And if I can be a part of that, then I want to be a part of that. So maybe that was another reason that I felt that I had to learn. So, yes.
Fantastic. Anything else, Praveen? Would you like to ask any other question? All right. Thanks for being on the host, and thanks. I'm sure people have really enjoyed the talk and the kind of questions that come in. Thank you, participants. Thank you, everyone, for the questions.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, all my friends, and Anu, for being here. Thank you so much.